Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this EUA webinar on attractive and sustainable academic careers. We are very happy to see very many of you here, and hopefully some others will still join us as we go ahead. My name is Maria Kelo. I'm the Director of the Institutional Development Unit at the European University Association, EUA. And before we get to the actual webinar, I just need to give you some kind of housekeeping information so you can make the most out of this webinar. On the right-hand side of your panel, you see different icons. You have a chat where we invite you to say hello to others. If you have any technical problems, you can address them there. If you have, want to share something, that's also the right place. For any questions that you would like to be answered by the panelists later on in the webinar, please use the Q&A function. Also, we have an icon for resources where you can access some key documents for this webinar. With that said, this webinar is being recorded and all the registered participants will receive the link afterwards, together also with a survey. So please do take a minute then to answer the survey and let us know how we did and what you would like to see us to do next. Also, the presentations are and will be available all in this event welcome page for this event, so you can find all of them there. This webinar was really prompted by the very recent publication of EUA's new document called Key Principles for Sustainable and Attractive Academic Careers, because we see that there is still a lot of issues in how to measure success in academic career, how to make the careers attractive and also linkable to other types of activities, professional activities and so on, how to integrate early career researchers and provide institutions also with the sufficient flexibility for recruitment at the same time as sufficient stability to make academic careers or maintain their attractiveness. So we created a document called this, and within which we list 5 key principles that are really kind of the key action areas for higher education institutions, but also for others who have an impact on academic careers, on how to deal with them. But you will hear more about those throughout this whole hour that we have together. So I will not say much more now, because I will move first to the kind of the set of presentations, and then after that you will have a chance of asking some questions through the Q&A function. So do please use that actively. We have constructed the webinar so that it's really a snapshot of some of the key principles, explanations for what those key principles are, alternated with other inputs in the same field. So both other work by EUA on academic careers, as well as starting then with David after my colleague Helene has first started with some data on what is going on in Europe in terms of academic careers. So I hope that concept becomes clear as we go on, because we want to show that our document, the key principles, are really connected to a wider context of projects, practices, information, and obviously does not exist in a vacuum. So we have 4 speakers today. They are David Crosier, Higher Education System and Policy Analyst from Eurydice, which is part of the European Commission in Brussels. Rita Morais, Advisor for Research and Innovation at EUA. Therese Zhang, Deputy Director for Higher Education Policy, also EUA. And Helene Peter-Bauer, Deputy Director in the Institutional Development Unit at EUA. And I would like to, first of all, hand over the word to Helene, who will start with kind of an overall presentation. Helene, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let's dive into the key principles, which give us this occasion to talk a little bit more about academic careers, how they are in shape these days in Europe, and what can be done to make them more attractive and more sustainable in the future. So the reason why we have set up this webinar is that, as Maria mentioned before, we have published these key principles for attractive and sustainable academic careers. You can access them now with the QR code. We also have a link in the presentation down there, which you will receive afterwards. But you also have the publication linked directly as a resource on the right-hand side tab. So plenty of options to access the document. So in the next minutes, you can focus just on some highlights that I will present. Just to give you a little bit of background on why EUA decided to address the topic of academic careers in the first place. We have in recent years done a little bit of work here and there on academic careers, on academic progression, on assessment indicators. And for a long time, for many years, EUA has already argued that universities, as well as national and international stakeholders, do need to pay due attention and give support to the attractivity and flexibility of academic careers, that careers need to reflect the parity of esteem between the university missions, as does basically everything strategic that universities do. We have also argued for a long time for incentivizing activity with diverse impact, so diversifying the indicators by which academic activities are measured and assessed, such as open science, innovation, but also teaching innovation. And for this reason, building on all of these previous activities in our advocacy work, we set up in early 2024, a one-year task and finish group that was tasked with advising and supporting EUA's overall work on reforming academic careers. But more specifically, it was also set up as a complementary and parallel work stream next to the QARA working group on reforming academic career assessment. My colleague Rita will talk a little bit more about the work of this QARA working group. So with the time I still have left, I would like to move on more about this task and finish group in particular. With the group, we really tried to ensure a diverse and comprehensive profile. Academic careers are often defined by national contexts and policies. Therefore, we tried to have different national experiences in this working group, which was chaired by EUA Vice President Ivanka Popovic. But we also had experts from our other expert groups, like the Council for Doctoral Education, so the CDE, or the Learning and Teaching Steering Committee in this working group, because academic careers really brings so many work strands and aspects of academia together that we wanted to make sure we get the full geographical scope and experience, but also reflects the holistic picture of what universities and academics do and how this is reflected in academia. These are, in a nutshell, the 5 key principles. When drafting the key principles, the working group followed several considerations. I mentioned before the need for parity of esteem between university missions is something that EUA has been advocating on a broader level for many years already. So this task and finish group tried to come up with key principles that on the one hand reaffirm the very central key role of research and evidence-based approaches in and to academia, while at the same time advocating for a parity of esteem between university missions as they are acknowledged and rewarded through academic careers. We also wanted to come up with a product that is both tangible, but also inspirational and aspirational. So we focused on 5 key principles that address, on the one hand, the professional development, recognition, and rewards. We also wanted to address diversity of academic staff, profiles, and career paths. We talk about the need to balance competition, or rather professional growth and collegial interaction. We address the specific role and needs of early career academics, and we also link careers with the broader embeddedness of academia in society in general. I will talk about those in a little bit more detail later, so for now I hand back over to Maria.
Thank you very much, Helene. So we move directly forward to David Crosier. Please tell us something. What do we know from the data that you've collected at Eurydice about academic careers?
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to EUA for organizing this event. It's what I'm going to present is actually some preliminary findings from a paper which we've been working on, which is going to be published in September, so it's not ready yet, but which came in response to the Council recommendation on this topic on academic careers, which was adopted in November 24. So we wanted to do a little mapping of a few issues affecting academic staff. So, so today I'm just going to tell you a little bit what we were looking at. It's essentially our paper is going to be focused on the status of academic staff, how they're employed, whether they're employed as civil servants or by institutions, whether they have indefinite or fixed term contracts, that kind of thing. And as well as national strategies, reforms and initiatives that have been taking place in recent times, so that affect academic staff. So that's what we've tried to pick up on, and I'm going to look just a little bit at what we found, plus focusing a bit on some of the findings for early career academic staff, which is one of the key principles for EUA and for Europe, I would say. But so first of all, looking at strategies, this is the picture. You see it's quite a varied map. So there are countries which have adopted a higher education strategy. There's quite a split between having a kind of higher education strategy or a research-based strategy. Sometimes there are different strategies in place in different countries, but there are also other strategies on a wide variety of topics, for example, on gender equity or diversity and inclusion, or other topics which have an impact on the way academic staff are employed and their careers. So, and there are also quite a number of countries which have no strategy, so they're they haven't adopted anything recently, and but they may have some other reforms or initiatives. But this is the map that you see for reforms. So we looked at reforms that have been adopted in the last 5 years, and essentially the main patterns, again, our research is another main topic for reforms, and then working conditions as it would be the headline topic for a number of the strategies, and then there are many others, and again, there's an increasing number here of countries which have had no specific reform in the last 5 years. Then there's some varied initiatives which we also look at. So, so just to say, in terms of investment in early career academics, what we see from this picture, as you see, a lot of countries have a strategy or reform that may have some kind of action and support for early career academics, but we can't be 100% sure that they do. We've got some idea of what they cover, but not necessarily that they're focusing actions on early career academics. There are, however, a few countries which have an explicit part of a strategy which focuses on early career academics, their career development and improving their working conditions. So France, Italy, Portugal and Switzerland, they all have strategies which are more on the research side. So they're kind of introducing contracts of different types. But for example, France is introducing 300 junior research positions each year under its strategy. Italy has a new contractual status of fixed-term contracts. So it's this kind of thing. All of them are trying to improve working conditions and career development for the early career academics. And Germany and Spain are also worth mentioning, not because they have any particular dedicated strategy, but because they have some programs which are providing support to early career academics. So giving scholarships and support in that way. But overall, I think what we're seeing is that there's relatively few examples of targeted action to improve early career pathways. So the initiative is very much welcomed from EUA. I think it's very timely that this comes. And what we're also not able to say, even where there are some strategies and directly affecting early career academics, we can't say whether those initiatives are effective or not, because we don't have data to do that. So so that's it. I think it's definitely a time where we need more attention on early career academics. So thanks very much for the opportunity to give you some insight to that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, David. Thanks a lot. And indeed, let's move directly to Helene, who can tell us a little bit more about our key principle on early career academics.
Yes, indeed. In the Task and Finish group, we actually decided to dedicate one key principle specifically to early career academics, because even though all academics, regardless of where in their career they are, need support, but early career academics are the most vulnerable group of academics, not only because they might be particularly prone to exploitation, perhaps precarious contracts and working conditions, but also because they don't know quite yet, probably, what awaits. They might have unrealistic career expectations, which is why we came up with this key principle, which clearly states that an investment in early career academics is not only beneficial for the early career academics themselves, but from the university point of view, it is also an investment in the sustainability of the higher education sector itself. But in order to work towards the realization of this key principle, we list here 3 success factors, so practical steps that universities can take in order to adequately support the early career academics. So addressing the elephant in the room, which is the precarious working contracts, short-term employment. One success factor is trying to be a little bit more creative and less risk-averse to provide long-term career opportunities, not entirely instead of short-term employment, because you still need that, for example, for research projects, but as a complement, as an alternative, maybe for a later stage. To short-term employment. And we actually have a couple of practice examples from the different countries represented in the working group on how specifically to get different funding sources, how to change internal regulations to offer more attractive working conditions. But I think a very key success factor is also clear and transparent communication and information with the early career academics about the opportunities ahead, what is expected of them, and how they can and will advance in their career with honest information, merit-based criteria, and equal opportunities. Because as I mentioned before, especially if you're young in your career, you might not quite know what to expect and what your actual chances of advancing are. Therefore, an honest and clearly communicated university policy, strategy, guideline that lays it all out to both supervisors, mentors, but also early career academics would be a success factor to making early career academics make it more sustainably in the long term in the higher education sector. And of course, another important point is adequate workloads. In a sense that early career academics are not limited to one certain task or 2 certain tasks, but get a broader range of experience, but without overburdening them.
Thanks very much, Helene. So that about early career academics. Of course, all these principles, they are also connected, so they have to work together for a real approach, but it's good to get a little bit of more insight into each, well, several of them. Now let's move to the next little presentation we have from Rita Morais, who talks about the COARA working group on academic careers and kind of the different assessment methods. Rita, please.
Thank you, Maria. So I'll just move the slide. So EUA has been coordinating this working group on reforming academic career assessment that is part of the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment. And the basic premise of this working group is that academic career assessment systems, they should reflect, and by this we mean assess, the different tasks, functions, and roles academics fulfill over the course of their career, and not only the research domain, which is, of course, very prominent in academics assessments, but there should also be other assessments of other tasks and roles of academics. So this working group, we have about 40 members mainly from individual universities across Europe, representatives also of university associations and of associations of researchers and research centers too. And we started working back in the autumn of 2023. And for about the first year and a few months, we have been, we worked on a targeted mapping of initiatives, both at national level and also at institutional level, on academic career assessment. And the outcomes of those of that mapping have been published now back in January, and they are, you have there the links. So we have some case studies, the results of a large-scale survey we conducted, and then based on the key results of the survey and the case studies, we produced a shorter document, which you have there the cover page of, which we've called informally the lessons learned. So key ideas from our results in the working group. And the most relevant to present here today is about the scope of academic career assessment that is expanding. And what we've seen through the survey results, where we gather data from individual universities and research centers, and mainly from Europe, but also beyond, and also from some case studies, is that there is a large group of institutions and also of countries that have a shared aim of meriting academic staff for a broader scope of academic activities just beyond research, and particularly research being assessed through publications and publication-related metrics. And so many organizations, they are either considering or already implementing some internal reforms to broaden the scope of what is assessed, to include, of course, research, but also other areas like teaching, leadership, societal outreach, etc. So as an example of the data we collected in the survey that corroborates this point, we've asked in our survey the universities and the research centers that participated, and there were around 200, currently, what is the importance of different activities that are considered in academic career assessment. And here, this meant really for the recruitment and promotion of academic staff. And what you can see there in the chart in the dark green light is that currently, or before the enactment of these reforms, research is the most important area considered in assessment of academics. And then it's followed by other areas, but the other areas such as education, innovation, etc., they're either only moderately important or they score very low in importance in terms of the assessment exercises. But when we ask them, what do you expect to happen after these reforms are implemented on academic careers, most of the respondents, they said that research is expected to continue to be important, but all the other areas are expected to increase in importance in the assessment exercises. A similar result is here on the next slide. So a similar question: what is the importance of these different indicators for assessing academic careers currently? And what you have there on the top right is that those indicators related to publications and research, particularly publications, are seen as the most important. And then all the others, they are way less important. But after the reform or these reforms are enacted, most of the other areas, all of the other areas, they are expected to become more important in assessment, and the importance of publication-related metrics are expected to decrease. And this is also in line with the COARA principles. So I will stop here and hand over to Maria again.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rita. That's this kind of visual image really brings it home, where the imbalances have been quite strong. So it's very interesting and very relevant. Now we move, thank you, Rita, we move back to Helene again, because we do have a key principle about the diversity in academic staff profiles, and I'd like Helene to say a few words more about that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. I also find these graphs quite interesting because they do outline a clear expectation of the higher education sector itself towards more balanced, rounder, and more diverse career assessment criteria, which is exactly what we wanted to support with key principle number 2. Which states that universities are diverse, and this diversity is also reflected in academic staff profiles and career paths. So now when you hear diversity, you might first think about the gender balance, maybe different cultural, geographic, or maybe even professional backgrounds of academic staff. So where do you hire your people? Where do you get your talent from? And this is indeed one of the important success factors outlined to reach the key principle with permeable, equitable, and inclusive access to academic careers. But what we have summarized before about diverse career paths extends much beyond the pure staff profiles. It is also about, on the one hand, the diversity of career paths themselves. We do argue for the need to make academic career paths more permeable, in the sense that it should not be a one-way road and you're either in or you're out forever, but people, talent should be able to move in and out of academia a little bit more fluidly, meaning to get professional experience, then return to academia, and vice versa. So it should not be such a closed path. But on top of that, and this really reflects what Rita was just talking about, we also argue very much for a wide range of evaluation criteria and practices as the basis for academic career assessment. We do, of course, still refer in our key principles to the need to work with merit-based criteria, with evidence-based approaches to highlight the crucial role of research excellence. But we do want to promote academic quality as the pursuit in excellence in various university missions, including learning and teaching, outreach to society, and research, of course. And with this comes that you need a broader range of assessment criteria, so that you, for example, also take into consideration whether academic staff has distinguished themselves through specific entrepreneurship, research impact beyond the typical bibliometric indicators, maybe innovation in teaching practices or outreach activities such as citizen science. So universities can certainly consider a much wider range of assessment criteria than what is currently the norm. But here I would really like to highlight that when we talk about a broader and diverse range of assessment criteria, we do not want to argue for taking away from research as a crucial criterion in career assessment. It is not a zero-sum game, but we want to advocate for fruitful links in between the different assessment criteria and what academics do on a day-to-day basis. It is not as if you can only be an excellent teacher or only an excellent researcher, but these two can really benefit each other. Nor do we want to incentivize an overburdening of academics with all kinds of additional tasks and efforts that they do have to make in achievements. So it's all about getting the right balance between variety and scope. And I'd leave it here.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Helene. And now let's take kind of the last external input to feed into our evaluation of some of the key principles. I would like to ask Therese Zhang to join me. Thank you, Therese, because EUA has a project called Staff Development Project. And Therese, you can tell us something more about that and how how staff development is an integral part of academic careers and their management.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria. Good afternoon, everybody. Also from my side, I will mostly focus now on indeed the staff development related aspects and how it intertwines with academic careers, but even more specifically, I will actually talk about staff development in teaching, which is the purpose of this staff dev project. And we define that as opportunities for higher education institutions personnel involved in student learning to grow their professional competences and reflect on their role conceptions, perceptions, and needs. And this translates into training, of course, but also community building and other development-related aspects. So we conducted a survey in the context of this project, and we also held a series of focus groups, and the results are also published in the report that you see here. Let's dig a little bit, okay, so let's dig a little bit into results. But first of all, what I would like to say here is also that staff development in general and staff development in teaching in particular should of course be seen as part of a teaching ecosystem. So this includes institutional strategies and vision for learning and teaching, of course, relevant staff development offerings, but also adequate support structures, complementarity between different types of offerings. I will come back in that in 1 minute. And of course, recognition for the time and effort in teaching, notably in career advancement. So I'm not talking here about self-development as a standalone, but as embedded into really this ecosystem, and Cult Open to play its role in that context. What we can see, first and foremost, perhaps 2 points. The first point is that staff development training in learning and teaching is mostly carried out and offered and organized in Europe by the higher education institutions themselves. So they have the primary responsibility for that. What we can also see is that the vast majority of institutions across the EACEA do offer training in pedagogy and didactics for higher education in a way or another. What we try to come up with in the context of the survey is to find out to what extent it was formal, so you have the definition here, or self-organized, so but a bit more of grassroots level kind of things. What we can see is clearly they are both, but that the different forms of staff development are also intertwined, not easy always to make a clear demarcation line here, and that many activities, in fact, are organized by the institutions, as I already said, but do not necessarily include assessment upon completion, even in the case of formal staff development activities. Courses might not be mandatory as such, yet still required for staff in the course of their career. So in other words, the mandatory character of staff development may depend very much on the status of the person, and also the state of advancement in career and teaching experience. This kind of matters quite a bit for actually academic career assessment, and I will get back also on that in a minute, because we will see that actually there is a quite blurry line right now on the overall importance of staff development and how it accounts for career. But first, I would like to address a little bit the challenges that have come up when asking institutions, what are their main challenges for proposing and organizing staff development? And you can see across the options here that the main point here is really about time. So time required from teachers to participate, and intertwined with that, of course, the fact that teaching is not valued enough in academic life. So basically individuals have to make time for that. And also that it is difficult because you need first to create a critical mass of teachers engaged into enhancing learning and teaching, and also try to engage people on the basis of their motivation. What we can also see from that survey, among many other things, is that actually formal staff development or training does account for career progression in about half of institutions that answered, which is actually not bad. But the way teaching plays a role in career progression is not always clear. There is a quite blurry zone between what is compulsory, what is an incentive, what is optional, yet it is still expected from individual teacher. So here we can clearly see that there is a gray area that may or may not support or may not hinder the overall acceptance for developmental approach towards learning and teaching at least. And what we can also clearly see, and I will conclude with that, is that the overall value of staff development very much depends on the value that institutions grant to the teaching activity as fully part of the academic profession itself. Okay, I will hand the floor back to Maria here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Therese. Thank you. It's really interesting to hear also kind of to call into question with some data our assumptions perhaps about what can be supportive of careers and how they are measured and evaluated. So thank you very much, Therese. Before and while I move back to Helene for our key principle 1, which is about professional development, I would like to remind all of you to use the Q&A function icon, which is on the right hand side just after chat. So because after Helene's brief intervention now, we will have some time for questions from you. So do use that, please. So Helene, what about the key principle 1?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Yes, key principle number 1, the one that appears first, and therefore kind of, sets the scene for how we talk about academic careers, at least in the context of our key principles document, does say that universities actively and transparently support academic quality of the staff through continuous professional development, so what Therese just talked about, as well as adequate recognition and rewards for excellence. So because it sets the scene, it addresses a couple of the points already that I mentioned before, because the key principles, they are in a sense organic and slightly overlapping because they contribute to one whole, but the lines between them are not completely distinguished. So you might already recognize a couple of things I mentioned before, such as clearly elaborated and communicated institutional policies for continuous professional development, which is something I also addressed briefly before when we talked specifically about early career academics. But key principle 1 is really about academics as a whole, regardless of whether they are senior academics, somewhere in the middle of the career, returning, exiting, just getting started. So this is really about the need to ensure that academics, regardless of where in the career they are made fully aware of the options ahead and how they can enhance their professional competences, and most importantly, which professional competences are actually required of them in order to advance in their career or just to do their job better. And also based on their own interests and talents. So this is quite an important aspect and success factor in key principle number 1. We do also complement the key principle with another success factor, which is about fair and clear policies for the recognition of achievements and the granting of rewards. So besides attractive working conditions and contracts, salaries, and support, including for staff development, whenever there is an achievement, one success factor is to really adequately acknowledge when an individual or a collective of academics have achieved something, and this concerns research, teaching, outreach to society. So also here we argue for very clear and transparently communicated policies for achievements, rewards, how those rewards are awarded, and how they are being evaluated. And finally, another success factor under key principle 1 is competitive contracts and salaries, as well as appropriate appointment and promotion procedures. Again, a little bit of an overlap with key principle number 4, which is specifically for early career academics, whereas key principle 1 is for academics as a whole. But also here we argue for a very broad and balanced set of assessment criteria, again, to minimize unnecessary precarity, meaning short-term employment where it is not necessary. And here we also argue very much for a little bit of creativity, a little bit of playing around with the different funding sources and seeing where is the appropriate balance between internal and external funding sources. External funding sources is, of course, a vital aspect of higher education budgets, especially for research projects, but an over-reliance on either one or the other might tip off the balance and make the entire structure fall down. So here it is quite important to ensure that you have sustainable funding scenarios, drawing both on internal and external sources to ensure attractive contracts and salaries. And this all plays, of course, into the broader need for providing adequate support structures and working environments for academics, regardless of early career or a little bit more senior.
Very good. Thank you very much, Helene. Now we've been through, if you're good at maths, you notice we didn't go through each of the key principles. We covered in specific detail 3 of them, but I think it's also an idea that will entice you perhaps to go and have a look at the document and read through it. So there are 5 of them, and they are all interconnected and all equally important, despite we had to put them from 1 to 5, but do have a look at the document. Now we have some time for questions, so I'd like to, yes, everybody's already there. We have 1 question, so please do take advantage of the next few minutes and post a few more questions if you can think of something, and surely I'm sure you can. There is a question that was particularly addressed to Rita, although also others might have a question, because I think that is a paradox that we often have. It's like if everything is important, something has to be less important. And is it a balance of raising importance of one thing and lowers the importance of others? So the question reads, if other factors in assessment increase in importance, doesn't that mean that research inevitably decreases in importance? It seems illogical to say that other factors will become more important, but research will remain as important as now. So how does it work? Can we kind of have more of everything, and or where's the balance to be found?
Yeah, so maybe I can start and other colleagues can interject if they will. So I think the main issue today in assessment of academics is that it's predominantly based on research, and then on a very narrow way of assessing research through mainly bibliometrics. And that neglects other areas of activities of academics. And so these reforms are mainly about giving proper recognition to the activities that academics are already performing, such as teaching, innovation, leadership, etc., but that are not taken into account in their recruitment or promotion decisions. And so it is not in the sense that, okay, if everything is important, then nothing is important, or one needs to increase and the others decrease. But it is a lot about of institutions defining different career paths if they wish to do so, and allowing that diversity to exist, and defining the different elements or the different components that are important in those different career paths. And that also increases transparency, as I think Helene also mentioned in one of the key principles. So if there are different career paths in a certain institution, for example, of course, research can have a more or a higher importance than other areas, but it's not just to say that research is the only criterion, or vice versa. If there is a career path that is more oriented towards teaching, there could be different weights in the different criteria. But this was a more general question, and the main message here is that contrary to what happens in most cases today, with some exceptions, in that research is the main component that is assessed, and through a very specific way, that other activities of academics that are already being performed, that those are acknowledged and those are recognized and rewarded for a fairer assessment.
Yes. Helene, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's also quite important to not see it as a summary where you give certain numerical values to how much of this do I do, and then how much do I add on top of that with other things. It's more about how you better link your different activities so they reflect each other better. So, for example, instead of seeing research and learning and teaching as separate spheres, if you have more research-based or research-informed learning and teaching, and if you maybe also include your students more in your research activities, they can maybe mutually benefit each other. Similarly, outreach to society, communication to society, all of this can ultimately help the impact of your research. So instead of purely seeing it as God, another task that I now need to fulfill, which of course can be another issue. We don't want to overwhelm academics with tasks, but instead of purely seeing it as just another task that you put next or on top of the other tasks, instead of integrating it with what you already do so they can really work with each other, I think this is how you see the bigger picture. This is how you get to a more round and really beneficial way of diversifying evaluation criteria. So it's all about linking things rather than putting them next to each other.
Thank you. Thanks both, and thank you actually, David, because the question did come from you. But we have a question also from somebody who is not visible on the screen, and the question goes something as follows: is there any connection between the efforts being made now, also kind of through our various principles, and the HR Excellence Award connected to the Charter and the Code? How are these all related, and what will be the significance then of HR Excellence and HRS4R in the future? I don't even know that acronym. So is there somebody who knows what to answer to that? Therese, you wanted to say?
I think Rita may be in a better position to comment on the Charter and Code. I guess it's the one for research, huh? Yeah?
Rita.
I mean, these are all different initiatives. They are connected in terms of the topic. If the HR code will have any significance in the future, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but it is part of this movement, of this broad movement.
Yeah, I think my feeling is that the idea is neither to duplicate nor to, let's say, compete with other initiatives, but it's rather kind of to really address the topic from all the possible different angles. And indeed, the kind of EUA key principles, it's very much of an institutional level support tool to say, well, these are really the things that we'd like you to think about when creating attractive or sustainable careers, or maintaining them attractive in a more competitive environment, perhaps. I don't see any other questions now from the audience, and of course we don't need to unnecessarily prolong it if there aren't any. Just a chance to any of the speakers if you want to ask a question to somebody else on the group, or just give your last word of what would you like to see in academic careers next. No? Any last words? No, David, go for it.
I mean, I think we can all say what we'd like to see.
Go ahead.
I mean, my impression, first of all, is that I think it's kind of what the principles are actually expressing is a kind of need to evolve a little bit in the way the kind of, let's say, the traditional ways of seeing careers is managed, and it's important for many reasons, but of course because of the world changing quickly, and the roles and tasks of academics also evolving very rapidly. And I think it's important that we're not stuck with kind of ways of seeing careers that are outdated. So it's important that we have the flexibility for people to be able to move into academia and out of academia more easily, not to be bound by rigid constructions in academic systems, and that all the roles of that academic staff may be required to fulfill, that these are actually valued, and not just the traditional roles, if you like, and specifically that in the end things are basically dominated by research and certain metrics for measuring research, which don't really reflect the importance and the value of all the work being done by staff. So so that's to say that I think there is an effort to be made. That's and I think it's important that that this agenda is actually kind of really discussed in depth and owned by the institutions themselves as something to take forward now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. I hope you can hear me because my computer tells me I have a very poor connection. It's one of the joys of modern technology sometimes. No, I think, David, very, very important points, and thank you. I think those are kind of quite wise last words. And as being the only speaker not from EUA, I think it's nice to end with that. I have some announcements about what happens next. So, of course, do go and read the key principles because you only heard a little bit more of 3 of them. They are available on the EUA website, and you have received the link in the chat. And you can just look for it. It will also be available in the resources in the CVent platform. And the key principles are really for the institutions to work on, to think about, to act on, to plan projects or prioritize their next career moves as institutions. But also, of course, EUA, we will keep in mind those principles and the topics that we had really felt were important to address in that area for future policy inputs and projects, events, etc. So watch this space. There will be more on careers coming your way. So the Attendee Hub is your go-to port for the presentations, for the recording, for the materials. So do use that. We will send the link to the recording and the feedback survey to you by email. And that is all from me now. I rushed my speakers because I feared everybody would be too long and you would have so many questions. So now we can actually finish a little early, but I hope that was an interesting session to all of you and that you learned something more and perhaps got some more inspiration about thinking about careers also wherever you are located. Thanks to all the speakers, thanks to participants for taking part, and until next time. Bye-bye.